Okay, here we go. Lesson number 4 in level 2, anatomy and physiology for exercise. And right now we're looking at something very interesting indeed, which is the nervous system and its relation to exercise. And you might think the nervous system is going to be very complex, and there are some scientific elements to it, but we're going to really try and break it down and make sure you understand what's happening and how the nervous system kicks in and how it helps us when we're exercising. And in particular, we're looking at learning objective number 8, which is to understand the nervous system and its relation to exercise. And we're going to be able to describe the role and functions of the nervous system, describe the principles of muscle contraction, describe the all or none law, and we're also going to be able to describe how exercise can enhance neuromuscular connections and improve fitness. Very exciting indeed. Okay, so the main control and communication of the centre of the body, that's what the nervous system is, okay? And the nervous system is responsible for maintaining homeostasis and providing the electrical stimulus that triggers skeletal muscle to contract, alright? And we'll break that down a little bit more. So the nervous system looks after homeostasis. So all the nerves in our body, nerves are all over the place. They're all over our body, then they travel back through the spinal cord up to the brain where they get interpreted, okay? And nerves are responsible for looking after homeostasis. And if you don't know what homeostasis is, it's a state that the human body is in where we're staying alive, okay? Homeostasis is what we need to do to stay alive. And it could be, dilation of blood vessels to make sure blood flows into the right place. It could be that we need to sweat, alright, to release some heat from the body. It could be that as basic as we need to eat or go to the toilet. And all of these things are required for order for us to be alive and be happy. And the nerves and the nervous system are what looks after this and make sure that it happens. And on top of that, the second point here, we have the electrical stimulus that triggers skeletal muscle to contract. And we should know now from the unit that we covered on muscles that the skeletal muscle is moved voluntarily, and that means that we can contract and we can relax. And when we do that, that's when our muscles move. And the nervous system is responsible for that. And the way that it regulates that and the way that it makes it happen is through electronic stimulus of the muscle, okay? And that's what the nervous system does. The structure of the nervous system, so there's two main divisions. You have the central nervous system, which contains the brain and the spinal cord, and then we have the peripheral nervous system, which is the nerves that lie outside of the spinal cord. So peripheral, meaning a bit further away, a bit more distant, and central, meaning close and in the middle. So the central nervous system, that contains the brain and the spinal cord. Very, very important indeed for sending those signals out to our body and making sure we can move in the way that we want to. And then we have the peripheral nervous system that contains all of the nerves that are sort of in all the other areas of the body, including sensory nerves and motor nerves. And we'll cover those a little bit more later on and look at exactly what they do. So the peripheral system is the bits that are further away, and they're divided into two different segments again, okay? Somatic and autonomic, alright? Somatic is voluntary stuff, so moving our muscles, standing up, picking away in the gym, going shopping, using the iPad, playing Xbox, all those movements that we use to do that, they're controlled by the somatic system. And then everything that happens automatically, so stuff like digestion, and other involuntary functions in the body, they're things that are controlled by the autonomic system. Okay, so somatic and autonomic. And the main role of the nervous system, when we're looking at the peripheral in particular, is to gather information, analyse the information, and initiate a response. And I'll give you an example, okay? Let's say that I pick up a very, very, very hot cup of tea, okay? The sensation that my nerves in my hand are going to detect is heat and pain. Okay, that sensation is going to travel up to the brain. It's going to work out what's going on, and then it's going to send a response. The response is going to be to drop that cup because it's burning my hand. Okay, so we've got sensation, analysis in the brain, and then a response to the action. And that's how the nervous system works. There could be different ways that aren't as that are not going to be as give us such an automatic reaction. So, for example, if I choose to let's say I open my laptop, I try to turn it on, and sensation is I press a key and it doesn't seem to be working. I have to analyse then what's happening and choose an appropriate response or action. And it could be that I press another key, I look at the power input, the switch on the wall to make sure it's all working, but it's still sensation, analysis, and then a response to that action. And we have the neural sensors throughout the body collect information regarding the internal and external environment, and then send it to the CNS. Okay, so the peripheral nervous system, that's our stuff that's outside, it's away from the central nervous system. So that's the bits that are collecting and finding out what's going on. It then sends the information back to the CNS, so it goes up the spinal column and back through to the brain. And then once the brain decides what it wants to happen, it goes again back through the PNS to create a response. Okay? And this will break it down in more detail for us, particularly the diagram at the bottom. Okay, so peripheral nervous system, that the sensory areas there, they detect a stimulus. All right, what happens then is that information gets sent along a sensory nerve or a sensory neuron up to the brain. And once we get to there, once we're going through the spinal cord of the brain, we're in the central nervous system. All right. The central nervous system interprets the signal, find out what's going on. Okay, what's going on here? What have we got to do? All right. Then action potential along a motor nerve gets sent. So we go back down into the peripheral system, down something called a motor neuron, which is that red one at the bottom there. And then what happens is the target organ or muscle responds in the way that the CNS, the central nervous system, and the brain want it to. And that was a little bit fast, so I'll break it down again one more time. So the peripheral nervous system detects a stimulus. Something's happening out there. It could be, let's use the hot cup of tea, okay? We touch the hot cup of tea. That's the stimulus, and the receptor there gets that stimulus. It sends that information through the sensory neuron back to the CNS and the brain, okay? The brain works out what's going on, okay? What's the response? And it then sends its response back down a motor neuron, okay? And at the end of that motor neuron, we have an effector, and that elicits a response, okay? Moving, touching, screaming, whatever it might be. Key principles of muscle contraction, alright? So following on from that, let's look at how the nervous system builds into muscle contraction. All right, we already know that we have origins and insertions. All right, and we know that we're using the muscles. They're voluntary, and we also know they work in pairs, and we also know that it's sliding filament theory that causes the muscles to contract. And in case you'd forgotten about that, here's our sliding filament theory again. We have the myosin, which is the thicker element, pulling on the actin, which is the smaller element, creating a contraction. But to create that contraction, it's the nervous system that engages that, okay? And what we really need to understand is how the nervous system sends that contraction into the muscle, all right? So let's go a little bit further into that. We have here the axon, all right? And the axon basically is the motor neuron. Okay, it's the motor neuron essentially, and the motor neuron brings down the signal to to here, alright, to this diagram that we're looking at now, alright. The motor neuron comes to here. This is what it does, and it passes down through the axon, and we decide if we're going to have a stimulus. So you can see you've got the muscle fibre at the bottom, okay, and I'll probably, I'll try and describe that for you in a little bit of a more understandable way. Alright, so signal comes down the motor neuron, or axon, alright, and the axon's made up of a series of cells called myelin, and what happens is that signal goes from the motor neuron into the individual muscle fibres and fires them and tells them that it needs to move. When they need to move, that's when the actin and myosin kicks in. When the actin grabs onto the myosin, squeezes it together, and we get our muscular contraction. And firing a nerve unit will generate a stimulus in that muscle. And what's important to know is that the muscle is the motor neuron is either on or off. Okay, it can't be in between. If we need a force that's like not our maximum, we don't just like half recruit a motor neuron. They're either on or off, and that's the way it is. And if we do need to move something that's a little bit smaller, we'll fire one motor neuron. If we need to move something that's a bit bigger, we'll fire two motor neurons. We'll fire number 1 and number 2 together. And then if something even stronger, we'll fire number 1, 2 and 3 together. What we can't do is we can't fire half of 1, 2 and 3, okay? It's all or nothing. What normally happens in terms of motor neurons is when someone begins to use the gym for the first time, particularly doing resistance exercise, what you'll find is that they can get some good strength gains very, very quickly. And that's not because the muscles are getting stronger and bigger, it's because our body's learning how to fire more motor units. So let's say we can only fire, this is just a very rough example, when we've not trained, we're in an untrained state, okay, we're able to fire 10 motor neurons. When we start training, we might discover, and our body might learn how to fire 15 or 20 motor neurons. And the more motor neurons we can fire, the stronger we'll become. And this happens very quickly. Within like 2, 3, 4 weeks of training, we can get some real big strength increases, especially if someone is training for the first time. And that's what's happening there. Our body learns how to use more motor neurons. Have a look at a little bit here of the adaptation to exercise. So particularly in terms of type 1 muscle fibres, remember these are the fibres that are good for our long distance or endurance type work. And what will happen here is, because we can fire more motor neurons, we'll have increased oxygen delivery there, we'll have increased enzymes within the tissue, and there'll be more glycogen in there that we can use for energy. In terms of type 2 fibres, we'll be able to, it says decreased nervous inhibition. So we'll learn and we'll be better at using those muscle fibres. So regardless of the circumstance, those muscles will fire and they'll work. Okay, the fitness and the strength of the muscle will improve, and that's got nothing to do with motor neurons. This is just the neuromuscular system being more aware of the body and using it in a better way. We'll have increased force, and we'll be able to increase tissue tolerance and resistance to fatigue. So we'll be able to work harder for longer. In terms of skill-related fitness, so these that we've just looked at here, they're physical types of fitness. We've also got skill-related components of fitness, and what that means is things like balance, coordination, speed, power, types of fitness that we would ordinarily use in our sports performance. Okay, they will improve because our neuromuscular system, so neuromuscular meaning nerves and muscles together, will get better. So if we practice, so let's say for example we go on a bike ride for the first time, no stabilizers. We're not going to be able to ride that bike. We're going to fall off, all right? But as we practice, the nerves and the muscles work together. They learn how to balance that bike, and therefore we have an improved sense of balance. Same thing with coordination. If you've ever played football and done some football keepy-uppies, when you first start, you can only do 1 or 2. Practice, practice, practice. The nerves get used to what's going on. They talk to the muscles a little bit more and in a different way, and then we can start to do more kick-ups. All right. The same for power, agility, and reaction time. It's all the same. The nerves will learn what's going on, and the more the practice, the better we'll get, and they'll speak to the muscles more and they'll work in a more effective way. Hopefully you can have a go at this quiz now. I'm going to leave it on the screen. If you want to have a go, have a go. We have covered all of these areas, so have a go. If you don't know the answers, go back through and find them, because if you don't know, you haven't sort of taken out the required knowledge. I'm not going to go through the answers for this one today, guys, but you should be able to find them in the presentation. Okay, that's the end. Hopefully you passed on the quiz and you got all of them right, and we should be able to describe the role and function of the nervous system, describe the principle of muscle contraction, know about all or none in terms of firing those motor neurons, and we should be able to describe how exercise can enhance neuromuscular connections and improve motor fitness. Alright, as always, hope it's helped. Drop me a line if you need anything. Next one that we're going to look at is the circulatory system. It's all about the heart. It's very, very interesting indeed, and I'll see you there.